All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jason Larson, and I'm the head of content and marketing here at the International Institute for Analytics. And I'm your host for today's session. And welcome to today's webinar, AI Readiness in Practice, Identifying Competency Gaps and Guiding Investment. In case you're new to the International Institute for Analytics, or IIA, as we typically call ourselves, we are an independent, strategic, outcome-focused data and analytics assessment and advisory firm. We're practitioners working with practitioners. Analytics is all we do, and we do it with a relentless focus on measurable impact. Visit our homepage for more information about who we are and how we support data and analytics leaders in making the difficult and necessary transition to advanced analytics and AI. Okay, before we dive into our presentation for today, we assume you're here because you're interested in IIA's point of view on what AI readiness means for enterprise data and analytics and how our AI readiness diagnostic tools help data and analytics leaders drive momentum for their AI initiatives. And we encourage you to actively participate in the session by adding your questions and comments in the chat or Q&A feature in Zoom, and we will address them throughout the session. We really want today to feel interactive and conversational. In fact, here's an icebreaker to get us started. So when someone says we need to do more with AI, quote unquote, what is your first reaction to that statement? Why don't you plug in a word or two in the chat, and we'll get that conversation started. All right, so a recorded version of this webinar and slides will be available after the presentation, so keep that in mind. And with that said, we are delighted to welcome Jack Phillips as our featured speaker for today. In his work at IIA, Jack focuses on how the adoption of data analytics and AI by certain firms leads to competitive differentiation and higher performance as the CEO of IIA. As we all know, AI is changing how enterprises operate, but most organizations are really still wrestling with the fundamentals, such as fragmented capabilities, uneven skills, unclear ownership, and no common language for measuring progress. And so in this session, Jack is really going to walk through how leading companies are assessing and strengthening their AI readiness using IIA's family of diagnostic tools. He'll break down what AI ready truly means at the enterprise, organizational, and individual contributor levels, and share where companies are getting stuck and what separates top performers. All right, before I hand the mic over to Jack, there's 3 resources we want to share with the group. So first, if you're interested in learning more about IIA's readiness assessments, our brochure is a good place to start. There's lots of good kind of introductory information in there. We'll drop links in the chat for all of these resources, so check that one out if you're interested. Second, our new ebook on bridging traditional analytics with AI in collaboration with IIA expert Nan Lee has been a popular resource for our community, and we wanted to share it with you all today. The practical guidance in this resource touches on really many of the issues that we'll be exploring today. So check that out as well. And finally, we would like to extend a free 30-minute follow-on consultation with our Director of Assessments for those who are new to IIA. Use the QR code on the screen or link in chat to schedule this free 30-minute consultation. A member of our team, Jack Taylor, will help schedule that call. And our assessments are for heads of data analytics and AI at non-native enterprises. So if this sounds like you and you'd like some time with our team to discuss your challenges with your AI initiatives, really please take advantage of that free consultation. I think you'll learn a lot. For current IIA clients, and I see some familiar names on the line, don't hesitate to reach out to the team to discuss our AI readiness assessment if you haven't already executed one. We're also happy to explore spot diagnoses tailored for your unique operating environment. All right, so that's enough for me. Jack, I think now's a good time to hand the mic over to you and let you take it from here.
Jason, I appreciate it. And I'm going to echo what you just said a minute ago. I am thrilled to see the commentary coming in on the chat to our provocative first question. And what I'm struck by so many familiar names there is, deja vu a little bit. In other words, here we are supposedly in this AI era, and yet, just a pantheon of great leaders here on the phone. What is the business problem? And boy, I love Kevin. I'm Kevin Spencer. I'm going to say, roll eyes. They don't even know the business problem. They just know the buzzword. So love it. Great way to kick us off. And we're going to take call it 25 minutes to present some frameworks on how we're thinking about what it truly means to be AI ready or ready for this supposed new era that we're in right now. But then I want to, in the last 20 or so minutes, Jason and I will have a conversation, but I would just love to hear from some of you, both chat, but even if you could raise your hand, we're going to just try and experiment, kind of a radio dial-in show. I'd love to have a couple of you chime in with your opinions and or your questions as we go toward the end here. So as most of you know, for the last 12 to 13 years, we have at IIA been maniacally focused, as Jason said, on really one primary question, which is how the use of data analytics and AI differentiates firms competitively. And for those that really are understanding how to use data and analytics to their advantage, there is significant gain to be had in all kinds of business side fronts, market share, revenue growth relative to your peers, and so on. And so in the last 2 years, with the frenzy toward AI, we are reminded of some prior eras. I'm going to go through that, but the common question that we've been getting really, I would argue for the last 14, 15 months is how do I know, is this different? And am I needing to be ready for something that's different than what we've been doing for a long time? And the questions are tending this year already to bifurcate between we haven't yet made a significant investment in this area. And so how do I ascertain whether I'm ready? But I have to say, unfortunately, the majority of these questions are after the investment has been made, right? And we didn't understand that there were certain attributes, certain things that we needed to be ready for in order for this AI investment to actually pay off. And so I think you have to think, where are you in that curve as you think about your own position in the firm? Considerations as we think about this problem or this challenge of really understanding, are you ready? First question is, why actually why actually take time to understand whether you're ready? And primarily it's because there are probably competency gaps and that need to be addressed first. And second, there is some framing around the investment and really the return business value or the ROI that is expected from CEOs and boards for these large investments. Most firms that we're seeing are thinking about measuring their readiness at the enterprise level, the function, division, or team level, and the individual level. So there's a big movement toward individual skill measurement and enhancement. So we'll come back to that. How would we use some sort of a report or some sort of an assessment of how ready we are? As I've mentioned, the ROI RBV, that should say RBV, not RBR, that calculation is really front in the line. Most analytics and DNA leaders are now really being pressed on that return. We believe 2026 will be that year of reckoning. 2025 was a free pass. Now I think we're into the year of reckoning, and shareholders and senior business leaders are being asked for returns. There's certainly if we're into this for the long haul, what's the operational roadmap look like? And I think that in order to create a roadmap, if you will, you've got to understand where you stand today. Got to diagnose the problems before you set about trying to fix them. And then lastly, I think the big elephant continues to be cultural adoption. We'll come to that in a minute. Two primary types of AI that really we're talking about and seeing here, which is the basic that's been around for a long time, the generative sort of tools that are here, LLM models, but increasingly a whole nother category, I would argue, is emerging around agentic. We'll come to that. I'm going to share a framework that helps you with scope. In other words, how far reaching should this readiness measure go? And then, many of you know, I mean, I'm going to repeat what I said a minute ago, that we think you cannot just circumvent, you cannot just magically snap your fingers and get AI maturity, that it stands on the shoulders of all the work that has been done in the data and analytics area over time. And then lastly, if you are going to actually try to quantify your AI readiness, you have to make a decision about whether you self-assess or you use a third party like IIA. One of our clients recently said to me, well, you can't schedule your own drug tests. So assessing our own AI readiness is problematic, mostly from a credibility standpoint, up north. So, okay, so I think those are the main considerations. If you leave this call and you're going to do this for you to think about. Just a couple notes on kind of what has come before. Let's use simply the big data era as perhaps a precursor. So what you have here on the horizontal axis is just simple Google Trends search terms, and call it a 5-year run from 2001 to 2005, end of fully of 2005. First arrow going left to right shows you that big uptick in terms of interest around this idea of big data. But then what you see is it's settled, right? And as we love to say, data became big data, but then it just went back to data, and it became an integrated part of what we do. So obviously then, is there a precursor here? If you look at the yellow line moving left to right, you obviously see just that traditional generative AI and big pop up right here as we got into 2023. And then it's flattened, and then obviously another uptick in 2025. Now, what do you make of the up and the down and the up and the down? I think those are interesting. But what's also interesting here is the sort of that little minor uptake in data warehousing, right? So deep learning's in there as well. So I think that largely enterprises, after the theater of AI, the AI theater, and sort of the rose-colored glasses, are finally understanding, wait, the data, and we've been thinking about that forever. So I think this sort of shows you how this is going. It's very hard to predict where we're going to go over time with the yellow line and the green line. Just hard to say here, but it's sort of interesting to put it all in perspective. So, excuse me, for many of you, I'm going to build through this slide. This is obviously second nature, and you've seen this kind of left to right primer for analytics. And I just want to underscore that, again, we see AI as a subset of broader analytics. It will fall into the cognitive category, right? So moving from basic BI all the way up into the right in this cognitive era. But again, so it's a part of that final area. But the message here is you cannot just jump to those two acronyms, those yellow acronyms in the upper right. That capability, that readiness, the ability to actually execute stands on the shoulders of data infrastructure, quantitative methods, teams, experience, culture. And so, that is important. I think for those of us who've been doing this a long time, this is an important graph. And if you're needing to say back to Kevin, your comment earlier about they don't know the business problem, just a reminder that this is a process, and that can be a useful framework to use. As we think a little then about defining readiness, excuse me, I'm going to go through this relatively quickly here, but what we have found as we've helped firms kind of derive the value quotient, the return business value, is that you need to think about this as how broad your target set is. Is this just an internal application of this? Is it going to be customer facing, kind of the targets, and then really the types? And so back to on the target side, are we really just saying, look, we're, for us, the extent of this is internal users, productivity gains. We're happy to just distribute Copilot licenses and try to drive efficiencies and gains? Or are there external targets? Or do we want to move this out to our own customers? Do we want to push it out to suppliers and so on? So that's one area in terms of sort of scope. here. And then, are we looking for just simple efficiency and productivity gains? There's been a lot written about how many hours a month someone can save using some of these tools, or are there broader economic improvement areas, revenue enhancement, risk mitigation, operational controls, cost reduction? Are you really trying to transform the enterprise here? And I know it may seem, boy, doesn't everybody want to be lower right in this diagram? Maybe, but not always. So, a couple just simple examples in the left-hand column. Everybody today, every enterprise we work with is rolling out some flavor of this new tool. Then others are sort of moving up the stack here a little bit, and beyond just handing tools from productivity, they're actually trying to revolutionize, whether it's coding or their customer records. This is fairly straightforward, customer self-service idea. As you then move to this broader other economic improvement category, an example here would be to put some sort of this chatbot technology on, let's say, your customer service or call center, and you could get direct cost reduction through, conceptually, you could close the entire call center. That would seem extreme. And then lastly here, to the extent that you're creating your own, you're making your own operation more efficient. How do you then drive this out in terms of customers? Believe it or not, enterprises are at different levels across this 2x2, but I find this is a fairly interesting way to kind of think about the scope of AI readiness. So the next 4 or 5 slides, I'm going to walk through then how we at IIA think about what we're actually measuring here when we do AI readiness assessments for clients, and hopefully it's helpful for all of you as you think about how you would proceed on this in this journey yourself. And so competency-based assessment, I'll show you the competencies here in a minute. We are really looking at the enterprise level readiness for adoption of both deep learning and generative AI applications. Both of those, deep learning and GAI, have distinct similarities. You can see them there. I don't need to read everything to you. We are really sort of moving to a world where you've got to think about the challenges of what we would call the black box complexity and lack of understanding of really what's going on here. And so you get all kinds of sort of risk introduction, risk reward outcomes. There's a trust element and what we would call sort of a potential fabulation issue. So we're again at the enterprise level. Those are the 2 primary vectors in terms of what we're looking for and that ability to actually execute here. So as I've said before, the AIRA, our AI Readiness Assessment, we love our acronyms here at IIA, is an augmentation and natural extension, really an elaboration of what we've done for a decade now on our analytics maturity assessment work. So, as we think about the difference between analytics and AI, there's a Venn diagram overlap. There are some uniquenesses for sure in AI, but again, I'm going to say it again, this AI world stands on the shoulders of what we've been doing for a long time. Specifically then, as we work, with clients in terms of the purpose of doing this, there's objectivity that stands at the top here. And so that drives really a planful adoption scenario. In other words, back to my earlier question, if you are in the unfortunate position of not having planned and now being, if you will, out there ahead of, over your skis in terms of investment, so many questions coming into us these days around, okay, those Copilot licenses are proliferating, kind of like Alteryx licenses used to. We don't know where they are. We're having a hard time measuring true utilization, but most importantly, we're really having a hard time understanding if we're making progress with those. So this idea of planful adoption is really, I think, at the center of what we're doing. I guess the next area really is is where are we least prepared and where do we face uncharacterized risks that perhaps should just be surfaced and discussed. Sort of this ready or not adoption scenario is not something, that necessarily we would advocate. So knowing in advance where you're least prepared is kind of important here. Discovery-oriented assessment scenarios. We don't know what we don't know, right? So we've got traditional ways of thinking about baselining our readiness. This is a new area. And primarily it's in what we would call the socio side of a socio-technical challenge. It is actually in the end user element. It's less in the technology side. So, I'll jump to the very bottom then in terms of the purpose or the intended use here, which is primarily for change management purposes, right? So you're going to hear me say this a couple of times. We are seeing this less as a technical challenge and much more as a change management challenge, and I'll come to that in a second. So we love, of course, our stage models. For those of you who have done an analytics maturity assessment, you're familiar with maybe Tom Davenport's original 5 stages of analytics maturity. We have a unique purpose-built AI stage model. It's got 7 stages from aware all the way up to what we would call pervasive. And so somewhere between a 1 and a 6.99, I call it a 7 score as we do these. And I'm going to show you the competencies here in a minute that we're scoring. But at the high level, as you go up in terms of maturity, you move from, there's simple awareness. Experimentation is fairly organic. It's not intentional. It's not planned. All the way up through scheduled POCs, and production grade deployments. And then finally, we're up at kind of repetitive, predictable outcomes, instrumented, stable processes. So again, take Jason up on his on the QR code to get this framework if it's interesting as you think about what your numbering system is, what your staging model might be. So if those then are kind of our number line and how we think about levels of maturity, here are the core competency groups. On the left, you can see the grouping. There are 55 unique core competencies that we believe have been published in studies that we think are important. When you add up all of the competency numbers here on the right, I think that adds, I should know this. Anyway, stay with the competency groups on the left. And, what's notable here, as has been notable in our whole existence, is you see words like human factors at the bottom. You see words like demand management. Of course, and those are on the sort of adoption and social and socio side. Of course, you see data technology, you see risk mitigation, privacy and security. But the highly mature are really balancing in this new era, this technical and kind of adoption and change management. So we actively want to be scoring from a readiness perspective, putting it quite simply, how receptive and prepared is the broad employee base at your firm today, right? Because obviously a fantastic tool, never utilized, doesn't work. Okay. As we then think about kind of an output, pretty traditional spider type diagram that we're delivering that gives you a composite readiness score. This is a proprietary then scoring algorithm that we've developed. We think that as you do this over time and you show your maturity, you must stay with the same methodology. Changing your methodology or your scoring system completely undermines your credibility. So just an example here on the right in terms of a particular firm's risk exposure, showing areas of what we would call underutilized capability, a certain area that's kind of an optimal areas. So a lot of what comes out of this is certainly a score, but it's that final bullet point as well, which is the findings that go with the recommendations. And so we really pride ourselves, I think, in terms of coming forward with the so what, if you will. All right, we understand the score, we understand where we rank relative to others. But what's most important is what's our fitness plan, our sort of our workout plan, if you will, for the next year. We've stepped on the scale, we've done the full proctological exam, we know where we stand, we know what we should be doing. How do we then, over that coming period, 6 months, 12 months, where should we focus in order to get the highest movement in terms of our readiness or maturity? We continue to use in the AIRA, in the bottom here on the right of the slide, this gap between what we would call importance and effectiveness, and we've added then another vector, if you will, which is experience. This gets into a lot of detail here, but we think ultimately that importance, as expressed by the demand side, needs to be in balance with the effectiveness that the demand side estimates as well, or the effectiveness of the supply side. And that ultimately is maturity, when expectations and actual delivery or effectiveness are in balance. So we've brought that in from the analytics maturity assessment as well. This may be not for everybody, but just a quick note on what we would on our own assessment instrument. And most importantly, when we do it, we believe you must. I'm going to go to the second bullet point here. The structure, I think, is fairly clear. We do both quant assessment, and then we have a set of qualitative. We have what I call a qualitative instrument. We call it a full text response opportunity. And we obviously sort of can come back almost with a net promoter score or a version of a net promoter score. But most importantly, on the respondent side, we call this affected demand segments. That's the demand side. That's the consumption side. Those are the consumers here. And I think it's important that when you're doing your readiness assessment, that you really linger on who the right affected demand segments are. The second bullet, analytics, data, and technology groups, pretty straightforward for the audience on the phone here. And then you've got obviously the sort of adjacent teams like risk, compliance, legal, finance. And in this world, because they are really part of this whole equation, to the extent that you can assess or understand expectations at the very senior level, I think you're doing a good job. That's a requirement of our AIRA, if it's possible. It says optional, but if it's possible. So that kind of gives you a sense for how we structure and how broad our assessment goes. So the goal here really was to try to I'm going to jump back to this slide. Just to have that up, really was to give you a quick nickel tour of how we think about AI readiness today in the context of analytics maturity, number one. Number two, that we see this as really a socio problem, that is almost at times almost an emotional challenge with users as much as a technical issue. And then keep your eye on the ball here. If you come back to that Google slide, we see some sort of a downshift coming. It's not a crash, but there is some sort of leveling here. Don't know what form it's going to take, but back to 2026 will be the year of reckoning. So with that, Jason, maybe we look toward if there are any questions that have come in. I guess I'll just keep this up. We'll just keep this up. Yep. As we talk a little bit, but would love to have folks join in or pose any questions if there's anything we can answer.
Yeah, please, everybody, add your comments and questions in the chat, and we can address those. We have plenty of time. So a question did come in at the beginning of your talk, Jack, and really kind of going back to this idea that data became big data and went back to data. So if you could double click on that a little bit and explain what you mean by that for the group.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
pretty foundational, I think, for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it felt as though, and I'm gonna come back to this slide here because I think, excuse me, right in the transition to 2022, if you've been in this space for a long, long time, there have been a number of analogs, perhaps, to this GAI, to this AI trend. So to stay with that question, you know, our sense is that the opportunity to really explode analytics and to really scale it became more possible as volumes of data that we could manage and that we could process increased. And so if you look at Wall Street, if you look at sort of the broad stream media, there was a whole lot of conversation and coverage around, okay, who is mastering large data, big data, bigger and bigger data sets. And those were the winners. Well, with technology, I think our perception is we went through that era and pretty much everybody caught up because they could buy their way to data management in the big data era. And so I would ask you in your own environments, how often do you today think of a challenge as big data? You don't. We don't any longer. And so
Mhm.
now if we take the far side of this graph and we look at this, both the green and the yellow for a minute. Now, maybe the question is, how do we, you know, sure, there's been a return toward data. I'm going to come back to that here in a second. But where is this going here? And I would argue that at some point, let's just keep it at the tool level for all of us individually, we won't talk anymore about, I pulled up ChatGPT and it was an amazing experience. I had this problem. I dropped my Excel sheet in and it spoke to me and it told me what I should look at. I don't think any longer, well, there will be a time when we don't say, God, this AI is just so different and it's so unique. It will become part of our fabric, both at the individual and the enterprise level. So now, one more thought here, Jason, before we move on, which is I mentioned sort of the data warehousing uptick, which we think here on the far right side is important because if you come back to if you come back to this simple slide, ultimately, what really sits in the basement of the foundation of doing any of this is data. And
Mm.
so 2026 leaders are saying, "Oh, you analytics folks, I get it now. You were telling us all this time, garbage in, garbage out, you used to say to us. If we don't have our data warehouse, we don't have our data in shape, we'll never be able to do advanced analytics." Well, and we kind of listened to you, but really didn't fund it at the level we needed. But now we've got this AI era. So now we get it. I see. So if we don't have a strong data foundation to stand upon, then we won't be able to participate in this new, in this new era that we must be participants in. So there is this return, I think, anyway, you back up to that. There is this then return toward attention to, oh, okay, I get it. We've got to get all that in place.
Yep. Okay, great. That makes a lot of sense. So, um, let's start with so Curtis dropped a really good question in here. So, based on what you've shared here, Jack, how much do you expect the AI readiness assessments to help companies avoid wasting time and effort and deliver more tangible value? Like Tom Davenport's 5 stages of a maturity model did for analytics, which our flagship analytics maturity assessment that we've had for many years is based on that model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think in a sense, Kurt, and good to have you on the phone. Or good to have you joined us. I think you've almost answered your own question because somebody said in a meeting we had yesterday, if you had a shoulder injury, and your physician isn't likely to proceed without some sort of a diagnosis of the whole body. What context perhaps led to this, and I think the idea that we've gotten out over our skis and folks have just rushed into this space. Numerous, started with the MIT study that was sort of course corrected, and there were other studies. the news is getting better, but for the most part, failed implementations or implementations that are failing to meet their economic goals, not failing altogether, but are failing to actually return what folks had hoped. And so our sense is, all right, you can't just rush in and sort of cure the elbow, you or kill the you have to say, what is this body capable of, right? Did that get caused by something else? Let's fix the foot, and then the shoulder will work. I hope this metaphor is traveling here, but fundamentally, right, you need a roadmap, number one. Number two, you have to have an assessment of, all right, for full implementation and success, where are the pockets of inefficiencies? Where are the weaknesses that we need to address before we can actually move wholesale into this new era? So we think it's crucial. We again think, I mean, we're biased here, of course, but if we rush ahead here, we think that this is as good a seven-stage model as any. This is deep. We've got, whole bunch of competencies. Don't get me started on the 5-question personality quizzes that are popping up from every software vendor today around, oh, we'll tell you how good you are at AI with 5 simple questions. Don't be deceived, right? Just like with the analytics maturity assessment, you have to go deep. You have to actually go, deep in the organization with the right methodology, looking at the right things.
So, have a comment here. My guess is that 75% of non-digital native companies are in stages 1 or 2. And, are they close? That feels about right to me. I don't have that percentage in front of me right now, but just based on our insights, that feels about right. What do you think, Jack?
Well, I think that's exactly right. And, Jason, you again, those of you who know IIA will recognize this. But if you were to lay on top our, if I can do this, our, the bell curve of maturity from our analytics maturity assessment. Again, we've been doing that maturity assessment for a decade now. We have a huge treasure trove of maturity scores. And to your point, the bell curve looks a little bit, we have a 5-stage model here, but it's very much like this with the long tail, right?
Yes.
And so, yes, again, we don't have enough AI readiness data yet, but my instinct says that you're right, that for the most part, folks are here, right? And and over time, the hump of this bell curve probably moves in this direction. But this pervasive, this is Spinal Tap. This is going to go to 8, and this is going to go to 9, and this is going to go to 10, right? So the actual state of the art is going to move in that direction as well. So first question is, from a baseline perspective, where are you here? That in other words, if you're in for a long journey here, and if you are committed, as most large enterprises that we serve are today, you must know, are we here? Are we here? And then again, we can talk a lot about overconfidence bias. When we work with customers, many will say, we think we're probably right around here, maybe a 3.5. Okay. And then IA comes along and says, well, in fact, actually, you're more like here.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So that's exactly tracking with how I was thinking about it as well. So we got a couple good questions here around data mesh and agentic AI that I want us to get to. So with agentic, it seems command and control of the agents is foundational, is being a foundational technology. So do you feel this is something that needs to be ready before we start agentic AI development? Is command and control technology maturing from what we're seeing with those clients that we serve?
Okay, I'm going to fully admit up front that command and control technology is not necessarily my area of expertise, but conceptually here, without question, that as we've moved from, if you think of IA as almost a barometric pressure reading, and in 24, 25, everything was just simply about generative and the common set of 11 or 12 tools. Okay. Now, as we finished off in 2025, if Olivia Meckel, who runs our research and advisory network, were on the call with us, she would say, yep, absolutely. Everybody's looking at agentic. Okay. Now, to us, that becomes really, it's a whole different category. And so there's a whole lot of opportunity for sure, but abound
Mhm.
risks abound. And so command and control for sure. There is an AI governance piece to figure out. I'm not really talking about that, but I'm talking about sort of as you run, as you stitch together multiple agents, there are many areas, many opportunities for things to go awry. And so, yes, the concept would be again, ready, aim, and then fire, not fire and then come back to it and say, gosh, we should have put some controls in.
Yes. Okay. So the question around data mesh, so how is mesh data analytics and ownership, how does this fit into the maturity model for us? Can you speak to that a little bit, Jack, or?
Well, you know, it's a technology capability, and so there's no question that to us to achieve that, to be able to get to that state again requires some precursors. Um, is that the main event? It could be again, but again, I sort of go to adoption before I would go to mesh, but that would be I guess my initial sense. But that's a fantastic inquiry question,
Yeah.
for example, that we would love to think about through our inquiry service. Probably not enough time to go in depth on this call.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What are some of the best practices you see to convince operational and financial leadership to invest in the foundational aspects to move up to prescriptive and AI ML accurately? This is a wonderful question.
Yeah. See, and I think it's such a perfect time to be to have that question. It's a perfect time to strike while the iron is hot. The frenzy is as high as it's been. I used to be in the information security space, and security leaders used to say nothing like nothing like a great exogenous event to draw
Yeah.
attention to our security posture. Well, um, uh, we're in that moment. We're in that moment. And so if you are in the position where you're out over your skis a bit, if you will, if you're a Microsoft shop and there's been a rush to, you know, adopt Copilot and roll it out as a simple example, um, the return question is prominent right now. And so it's a time to say, okay, we've run a bit of a pilot here in 2024 and 2025. We've seen some good results, but what we're also exposing is that there's some foundational elements. You call it data strategy, you could call it adoption, you could call it training, any of these areas. There are a number of foundational elements that we need to come back to in order to continue to drive a return on this investment we're making in AI. This is that magic moment, I think, right? Because it's working. Enterprises are seeing success, not through the roof yet. It's not just free value. There's been some real work, but I think so. There is success to point to. And I think now is exactly that time to say, okay, if we're going to do this across the enterprise, let's go back and actually get our ducks in a row, if you will, get our foundations set, again, both technical and socio, so that we can really scale this over time.
Okay. All right. So that makes a lot of sense. Let's see here. Okay, to make a business case for foundational data and analytics investment, is it better to score lower in the oh, this is great. Is it better to score lower in the AI readiness score or higher? Which presents more urgency? And what I really appreciate about this question, it is thinking about how to leverage an independent, unbiased assessment to have to navigate um, these initiatives, politically and organizationally.
Yeah. Lev, good to have you on the phone. Thanks for joining. It's a great question. I would actually opt for it's a little situational. So again, if you're out over your skis and you've made these investments, I would opt for a low score. I would opt for, okay, buck fever, we were out ahead, we went ahead, but gosh, what that has exposed is we weren't quite ready. We didn't have our AI governance board established. So now we're starting to get the risk folks really starting to question, hey, when people drop an Excel sheet from the finance group into into ChatGPT. Is that okay? I mean, I'm making this example. Of course, it's up. Of course, it's not. So if you're in that position, I would argue low works because you've exposed the vulnerability, if you will. Whereas if you have been planful and you have been perhaps slower to adopt, I actually would opt for a bit of a higher score. Might say, okay, we're middle of the road. There are some improvements we need to make here, right? We're not so high yet, but but this score should increase as we make our investment. So it's a great question because I think all of you out in radio land, I do believe you're divided, and half of you are out over your skis, and half of you are of the wait and see environment. And that may be based on your company culture, that may be based on IT spend, the industry you're in, whatever it is. What I know is though that those that are committed to this game need to be doing this periodically and show change
Hmm.
right? And so
Hmm.
is that every 6 months, a pulse survey on, what's the sentiment index around the adoption of AI across the firm? That's a great way to say, gosh, more and more adoption. And we're really measuring, how much time we're getting back, for example, from employees. And then the magic question is, what are folks doing with that extra time? We
Hmm.
were out at a client last week or a week or two ago in Des Moines, Iowa, and that question, are they going home early? Are they working on higher value things? Um, you know, um, uh, are we replacing? Are we laying folks off? That's a critical question you have to ask next.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it also kind of gets to this idea for us where, our the a maturity score for us is really the journey and not the destination. So I think that really kind of fits into sort of how you kind of position yourself and navigate the score that you might get and how you position that score
Yeah,
internally.
yeah.
Um, so I got a couple more questions here coming in through the Q&A that sort of double click on a few things few themes, I guess, that you've covered, but maybe expand on them a little bit further. So, really from our vantage point, what do most leaders get wrong when they ask, "Are we ready for AI?"
Yeah. Well, yeah, I feel like I'm a broken record here, but I continue to think the natural human proclivity is to assume we're meaning technical preparation,
Uh,
technical readiness. All right. Have we deployed the tools we need? Do we have, sort of technical guardrails? Are we, what is the state of our data? Are we utilizing just internal data? Are we taking advantage of external sources? When in fact, what I think we're in an era where the highest gains, if this is all about how do we make our firm excel in our traditional financial and operating metrics. Are we growing revenue? Are we operating at a lower cost? Are we growing share? Are we introducing new solutions and new offerings? What's the net promoter score among our client base? Keeping those in mind, and I think ultimately, whether the real the the thing that is continues even from the analytics era time is not focusing on the people side of this, the socio side. And so, our we were just talking yesterday about the role of the use and the support of AI in employee satisfaction, right? And that ability to attract new talent and retain that talent. And so I think the gains on, yes, for folks coming out of college or graduate school, your firm is going about this in a sort of an intentional and judicious way. I want to be at a firm that does that. If you're in the healthcare space, I continue to believe that patients are paying attention to your AI stance,
Mm.
real or theatrical. But are you using some of these new technologies to lower wait times in emergency rooms, or hand intelligence to physicians to do their jobs both faster and more effectively? And so it's those socio elements that I think are overlooked, but the highest performers are very focused on that. And then this, Jason, that we've studied a lot about what are the characteristics of a data and analytics leader, and so I suppose you could argue the new AI leader. And so, we're seeing a lot of announcements about new directors of transformation or AI being named in firms. But I think the skill set that is needed there is, no question, you've got to know the technical side, but understanding how this thing is going to drive satisfaction among employees and customers. I think that's what you have to become a student of. And that
Mm-hmm.
is where the majority of firms are going to get the highest gains, at least in the near term.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, we just have a few minutes left here. Perhaps expand just to touch on where you're seeing, where we're seeing, the most hesitation or uncertainty showing up right now. When you're talking to heads of data and analytics at non-digital enterprises, where is the uncertainty or hesitation coming from in kind of taking that next step?
You mean in terms of taking the next step in terms of the AI journey, or in
Yes,
terms of
yes, yeah,
measuring
AI journey. Yeah,
readiness?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, gosh. And I see so many folks on the phone here who I would love to bring on the line here to answer that question. Craig Brayback, I see you there. But um, this is a little bit off topic from what we've been talking about today. I think, if you're an analytics leader on with us today, you are certainly being challenged on this very fundamental question, which is AI an entirely new vector? Is it an entirely new sport, if you will? Is it an entirely new area that we need to now be proficient at? And therefore, do we need to bring in an entirely new infrastructure, an entirely new team, or which is completely misguided? Or is this, again, understood by senior leadership as an extension of what we've been doing for a long time? So to answer your question, Jason, I think the hesitation here is okay, role wise and who does what wise inside of large enterprises, that needs to be settled.
Hmm.
A couple of weeks back, one of our customers said, "Yeah, we hired an AI officer. You know what they do? I'll tell you what, the only thing they do is they manage the Copilot licenses that are out there."
Yep. Yep.
Really? Yeah, well, that's what AI is to us right now. It's a new piece of software. It's an enhanced search engine. That's all it is for us, right? But leadership didn't seem to understand that this is actually the same game. It's not a brand new game. So that challenge of sort of reminding and verifying, this is a role that's been around for a long time. Don't overlook it. I think it's a challenge. We all know on the phone that it is completely, we know the truth, and yet we're still in 2026, a period where we're going to have to kind of go through the clouds of AI theater to get back to reality.
Okay. So with that, in a minute, what's one piece of advice that you would give to DNA leaders
Stay the
in,
course. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
well, yeah, in planning their AI roadmap or in planning on how to get started on this journey?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first, stay the course. Okay. So we'll get through this period, right? To refer to what I said a minute ago. But also, I think, this is certainly a plug for IIA. A lot of smart people are thinking about this problem. A lot of smart people are putting their roadmaps, their operating plans together. Don't think you're out doing this fresh cloth on your own, right? Um, this is use the community
Hmm.
to think about everything from, okay, we need an AI governance council. How do we structure it? Who sits on it? Don't guess at that, and certainly don't go to ChatGPT to ask the question. Use your peers to figure out what's working at large promising enterprises. So we are the conduit to that community, to that what is working at the ground level. So that would be my primary piece of advice, I think, Jason.
Okay. All right. That's excellent. All
Oh,
right,
oh, Craig.
folks.
Oh, hold on, Jason.
Yeah, preach,
Oh,
Jack.
can
Preach.
you just
Yes.
read Craig's comment? That's a great way to close.
It is. It is. If your data isn't ready for BI, it probably ain't ready for AI.
Thank you, Craig
That is the
Brayback.
truth.
We love you, man. We love you.
That, that is the truth. That is the truth. Well, thanks everybody. Your comments and questions really helped this session be a success. So thank you all very much for participating. Again, we will be sharing the recording of this webinar in an upcoming email, and it will also be available on our website. And please take 1 minute to give feedback on this session. If we do have a survey that pops up, oh yes, we do. Great. It helps us develop timely and relevant content for the community. It'll just take a second here. And stay tuned on our email and social channels for tools and resources and other content to help you with your AI journey. A good place to start is our AI Resource Hub, and that answers many questions like how do we turn our AI ambition into business outcomes that leadership will recognize and support? How do we deploy our AI safely when our data and governance foundations are still maturing? And how should we structure our teams and operating model to accelerate AI across the enterprise? Just to name a few of the questions. That hub has expert frameworks, sorry, exclusive roundtable peer insights, and as well as key takeaways from real expert exchanges at AI. And again, if you are head of data and analytics on this line and you're new to IIA, please take advantage of that free consultation, and we would love to help you think through your challenges. All right, folks, onward and upwards. Thank you for joining today, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.